In retrospect, it should have been obvious from the start that there is something really weird going on. It was my first time renting an apartment, but even I thought that the landlord was eager for me to move in as soon as possible. The rent was ridiculously low for the area, the apartment itself was in pristine condition, and the whole process from touring the apartment to moving in only took about a week. Nothing like that comes without a catch. Apartment 311 was a pleasant place to live at first. It had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and since I lived alone, that meant I had to convert 1 bedroom into my own office. It came with a handful of paintings already, so I didn't even have to have the off-putting, liminal feeling that some empty apartments have. The only immediate downside I could tell from the start was that there was a slight smell in the living room from time to time. It wasn't anything too noticeable, but you would occasionally get a faint whiff of some sort of musty odor. I was only living in my apartment for a couple weeks before I noticed anything was wrong. It started out with simple stuff, like various knickknacks being placed on the wrong shelves, snacks and small objects going missing, things like that. Once or twice, I found the fridge left open. These things would only happen when I was asleep, and made me feel like I was going crazy. There's no way anyone could be breaking into my apartment just to steal some useless crap and move around some collectibles. The door was locked whenever I went to bed, and even if someone hypothetically had the key, I always made sure to bolt the door as well. I considered getting some security cameras set up, but I balked at the price when I looked into that possibility. Though the apartment was admittedly cheap, between rent and utilities, I still couldn't afford to set up an entire security system. I tried to put it out of my mind, assuming that maybe I was just sleepwalking or getting up for a midnight snack and forgetting by the next morning. I'd never been an easy sleeper. I was often prone to night terrors and other disturbances, which had only gotten worse. Of all the sleep problems I've experienced, by far the least pleasant is sleep paralysis. It used to happen fairly rarely, maybe once every 2 to 3 months, but after moving into the apartment, it became an almost weekly occurrence. Now, usually my sleep paralysis is fairly mild. I find myself unable to move, eyes open, and I find it difficult to breathe. Sometimes I feel there is a presence in the room with me, but before I moved, I had never experienced any form of hallucinations, visual or otherwise. I'd never seen a ghost, monster, hag, or any other sort of entity while I was paralyzed. It was only ever a sense of dread and total paralysis of the body that changed about the same time I noticed missing food and misplaced objects. As usual, it felt like I had woken up but couldn't move a single muscle. It was hard to breathe, and I had this awful feeling like I wasn't alone. I tried to calm myself down, to remind myself that I'd been through this before, and that I always wound up okay, but something felt different this time. It was then that I noticed the door to my bedroom slowly opening, inch by inch. I could hear the creak of the hinges as it swung inward. Someone or something was coming into my room. He peeked his head around first, dull eyes reflecting the faint glow of moonlight from my bedroom window. He was bald with pale, flaky skin. I wanted to scream when I saw his expression, but I was still a prisoner of my own body. The man had a forced, rictus grin on his face, chipped yellow teeth clenched tightly together, grinding against one another. I watched in horror as the rest of the man's body slowly passed into the room, tiptoeing as if he were creeping up behind someone in a cartoon. The man was utterly emaciated, almost skeletal in appearance, and covered in sores and pockmarks. He was stark naked and smeared in dirt and filth. I could do nothing but watch as he slowly inched ever closer towards me, till I could feel his hot breath upon my face. It smelled like musty odor I sometimes detected in the living room. Not once did I see his expression change though. He didn't even blink as he stared at me, and I could feel hatred radiating off him like heat from a furnace. He just stood there, looking at me for what felt like hours. Eventually, he turned around and slowly sneaked back out of the room, gently shutting the door behind him. A few minutes later, I started to be able to move again, the paralysis wearing off as my body started to wake up properly. I had to call in sick to my job that day. The experience was such a shock to me that there was no way in hell I'd be able to get any work done. I spent a good hour just checking every room to make sure I wasn't entirely alone. I searched the closet, underneath the sinks, in my office, anywhere I thought someone could be hiding. When I found nothing, I managed to convince myself it was all a hallucination, that I was safe. Things continued about the same for a while after that. Objects still went missing from time to time. The smell in the living room stayed just as musty as it ever was, and about every week or so, I'd have another sleep paralysis incident. Of course, now every time I did experience sleep paralysis, I'd have to see my unwanted visitor again. I named him Jimmy, to try and reduce the terror a little bit. Putting a silly name to a horrifying face helped lessen my fear slightly. As far as sleep paralysis hallucinations went, Jimmy wasn't too bad once I started to get used to him. He never touched me or sat on my chest like some people's nightmares did. He just stood and stared. It was still deeply unpleasant, mind you, but I felt lucky that it was a consistent kind of unpleasantness at least. Then I found the photograph. I noticed it underneath a pile of papers while I was doing some cleaning up. A picture of two women embracing in front of a waterfall. I didn't recognize either of the women, and I assumed it must have been from the previous tenant. I texted the landlord, Greg, and asked if he still had the old tenant's phone number so I could give her a call. He obliged, and within a few minutes I was calling her. She picked up after a couple rings, sounding slightly exasperated. "Hello, this is Rebecca. Who's this?" "Hi, my name is Flora. I'm the current tenant of apartment 311. I think that you may have left a photograph behind when you moved. I was wondering if you'd wanted to pick it up or I could mail it to you or something." There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. "Hello?" I asked. "You need to get out of the apartment. You're not safe." I honestly didn't have any response but to laugh. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked her between chuckles. I heard her sigh with frustration. "It's not a joke. I'm serious. Things have been going missing, right?" That got my attention. "How do you know that?" I asked. "It happened with me too. My girlfriend and I kept noticing things being moved or disappearing while we were asleep. Little things mostly. Snacks, trinkets, nothing major. Now, I never saw this, but my girlfriend swears one time when she got up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water, she saw this naked man just staring at her. He was covered in sores and looked more like a corpse than a person. She woke me up and we called the police, of course, but they didn't find anything. I think..." Rebecca paused for a moment, choosing her words. "What? What is it?" I asked, increasingly panicked. I began to worry that Jimmy was more than just a simple hallucination. Fuck, I messed up. "I think 311 is haunted. We asked around to some of the other residents, and apparently the last guy to live there just disappeared. Our best guess is that he must have died and his spirit just never left. My girlfriend is into some occult stuff, so she tried a cleansing ritual or something like that, but it didn't work. Things kept disappearing, and eventually we just decided to move." I hung up the phone. It was rude, sure, but I was just so shocked that I didn't know what to do. At the very least, I began to understand why I got this apartment for so cheap. I found myself just sitting on the couch for a while, occasionally getting a whiff of the musty smell. I stared blankly at a painting on the wall, one of the ones which was already there when I first moved in. It depicted a woman in a white dress, sitting underneath a tree reading a book. I couldn't tell what was making me so focused on it. It seemed utterly unrelated to what was happening. Eventually, I slumped out of it and went to my office to do some research. After a little bit of digging, I found out some information regarding the tenant who lived here before Rebecca, the one who disappeared. Apparently one of his coworkers put out a missing persons report 6 months ago. His name was Michael Hansen, and I gasped when I saw a photograph of him. He looked exactly like Jimmy, albeit not so emaciated and filthy. I hastily packed some of my things and made arrangements to stay at a friend's house for a couple nights, telling them that my apartment had a roach problem and the landlord needed to fumigate it. I called into work and gave them some sob story about an uncle dying, enough to get time off for a few days. With no more distractions from the ghost of Michael Hansen, I slept soundly on my friend's couch, unbothered by any sleep paralysis. The next 2 days were spent researching. I checked out dozens of books on folklore and the occult from the local library, scoured paranormal internet forums, and even watched a few episodes of some cheesy ghost hunting TV show. I was determined to figure out a way to put the spirit of Michael Hansen to rest. The stories were all wildly different, with countless potential solutions to my problem. Some sources said salt was a surefire way to banish spirits. Others said iron was a good ghost repellent, but mostly simply said I should give up and move. However, one myth piqued my interest. According to some beliefs, the spirits of the unquiet dead could be tied to objects from their life, binding them to the place where the object resided. If the object which their soul was bound to was destroyed, it freed their spirit and they could move on to the afterlife. I remembered the paintings. I'd assumed they were put there by the landlord, but it was just as possible that they were left behind by Michael. I arrived back to the apartment, determined to grab paintings and burn them, laying Michael Hansen's soul to rest once and for all. I felt like some sort of hero, a badass monster hunter who saved the day with her intuition and a little bit of book smarts. One by one, I pulled the paintings off the walls, putting them in a cardboard box. I made a mental note to buy some lighter fluid on the way to the empty lot where I planned to burn them. I approached the final painting, the one which showed a woman in a white dress beneath a tree. I pulled it off the wall and recoiled as the musty smell increased in intensity. Staring in confusion, I saw a small rectangular hole where the painting used to be, about 4 feet off the ground and 2 feet by 2 feet in length and width. I shuddered in fear, remembering that Michael's body was never found. Perhaps he was murdered, his corpse hidden in the walls by some unknown assailant. I nervously flicked on my flashlight, peered within the hole, and screamed. I ran out of apartment 311 as fast as I could before calling the police, sobbing with terror. I had been prepared to find a body, maybe cut up into little pieces and wrapped in duct tape. I was ready for death and decay and rot. There is something fascinating about ghosts. Something somehow romantic about the notion that part of someone could live on even after death. But there is nothing romantic about seeing the clenched tooth grimace of Michael Hansen glaring at me with hate as he stood in the small section of hollow wall which he had been living in for the past 6 months. I got a job as a night guard at a local supermarket. I'm already quitting. Keeping up with college fees is difficult to say the least. If I want to get a job, it would 9 times out of 10 have to be a night shift job. During the day until about mid-noon, I have lessons, and from then until about 6 p.m. I have to do my homework. As I was scrolling through an endless supply of ads for minimum wage jobs, I came across one for the supermarket 5 minutes away from my campus. I sent an application through their email address. Surprisingly, they accepted it almost instantly. It had taken me by surprise when they sent an email back telling me that I was expected to show up tonight at 10 p.m. It was still 7, so I made dinner and waited until about 9 to start getting ready. When I arrived, the day shift worker was already leaving. He showed me around a bit, and right before he left, he told me that there was a set of rules I have to follow in a book on my desk. Besides me, there was just the night cashier, with whom I only exchanged a few words with. I went back to my table, and in one of the drawers found the said manual. Here's how it went. Hello, Night Owl. We welcome you to this position as a night guard, a set of rules to follow to ensure your safety. Number 1. Once about 20 minutes, do a round through the store. Should you notice anything out of the ordinary, immediately return to your desk and hide underneath. It should leave after about 3 to 4 minutes. Number 2. Once every half an hour, go to the back of the store and count how many boxes there are. If there are more boxes, pick any which you want and throw it in the dumpster behind the building. If there are less boxes, it's too late. Get out of the store and lock the doors, only return an hour later. Talk to the cashier every once in a while. Take notice of their appearance. Should they have weird, distinctive features, take the gun from the drawer and shoot it. If it doesn't have a face, repeatedly yell at it to get out. It will eventually leave. Do not shoot it. In that case, you will anger it. Number 4. Sometime during the hour of 3 a.m., somebody will come in here asking to speak with Jimmy. Keep saying that he doesn't work here and I should leave. Number 5. Never manually open the doors for somebody outside. The doors are automatic. It can't trigger them. Number 6. If someone is heading to the checkout, even though they never entered, shoot them. No double guessing. As long as you follow these rules, you should be fine. Good luck. I closed the book and thought about what I had just read. Surely this is just a try from the management of the store to keep me alert. Still, 21 minutes had passed since my shift started. I decided to do a round. As I was in my last 2 aisles, I noticed that at the base of one of them was a bag similar in appearance to one of the chips, only it didn't have any kind of label. I picked it up and noticed that it was heavier than it should have been. I ripped it open and an eye stared back at me. It was a bag full of eyes. I dropped it and sprinted to my desk and hid underneath. I waited there until the alarms in my head stopped ringing about 5 minutes later. I got out and went back to the aisle the bag was from. It was gone. Just as I was processing what had just happened, I realized that half an hour had already passed since I started work. I quickly made my way back to the store. There needed to be 33 boxes, and just as the door creaked open, a box that hadn't been there before was just sitting in the middle of the room. I didn't even take a good look at it, that it was already in the trash outside. I got back to my desk. Things were quiet for a while, but I remembered the third rule, took my gun and went to exchange a few words with the cashier. I didn't need to get too close that I noticed it. The cashier only had one eye in the middle of her face. I pointed the gun at it and didn't even flinch. I pulled the trigger. After a few seconds, the cashier with a normal-looking face emerged from under counter as if nothing had happened. Again, I made my way back to my desk. Nothing happened for what I would estimate was an hour and a half. Suddenly, a man enters the building with a dark shadow casted over his face by the hat he was wearing. As he got closer, I realized that only skin covered the eyeless, mouthless, and noseless face. He started telling me that he wanted to speak with Jimmy. The sound didn't sound like it was coming from him, but rather from all around me. I kept telling him to leave, and he eventually did. Again, just like the calm before the storms, things quieted down. After a few quarters of the hour had passed, I heard tapping at the glass doors. Sure enough, there was a human at the door, mouthing the words, "Open it." As there was nothing in the book mentioned about what I should do in this situation, I just ignored him until it was gone. It was 4 a.m. at this point, and my shift ended at 6. I decided to do a round to the back of the store. I counted the boxes, 32. I got the hell out of there, told the cashier about that, and we both got out and locked the door. We waited for what seemed like the longest hour in the whole world. She didn't really seem fazed by any of this. I guess she was no stranger to these things or something. When we got back inside, someone was making their way to the front of the store with a basket full of goods. Even though they never entered, I just shot it and it turned to dust. Nothing happened, but when the day guard arrived, I was already making my way to my dorm by speed walking. Even though I had escaped that night rather unscathed, I won't risk it again. Better in debt than in grave. That is going to be the end of this video. Thank you all for coming by and being here with me for my first ever upload. Give me suggestions in the comments on what to cover next. If you want me to do icebergs, different topics, etc. Right now I have like 2 subscribers, so if you made it this far, subscribe please. Love you. Have a good day.